Sonic CD, also known as That's Not a Number, is the mainline Sonic the Hedgehog game released for the Sega CD. Released a mere 10 months after Sonic 2, Sonic CD was always the black sheep of the classic Sonic chronology. It's easily the game that's been re-released the least compared to 1, 2, and 3, and it was a title that eluded many Sonic fans for many years. Due to growing up in an exclusively Mega Collection Plus household, Sonic CD was a game I didn't really know about as a kid. There is zero mention of it in Mega Collection Plus despite the game's intro being in the base game's release, so its existence was unknown to me for quite a long time. The closest thing I got to experiencing it was the Metal Sonic fight in Sonic Generations and the 1996 Sonic OVA, which is kind of an adaptation of Sonic CD but has plenty of changes that ultimately makes it its own thing. I can't remember when I first learned of Sonic CD's existence, but regardless, I'm going into this one almost completely blind, so I'm pretty interested to finally check it out, especially now that I have the first 2 games under my belt. Where do I begin? Well, let's start by talking about the Sega CD, Sega's failed CD add-on for the Sega Genesis. The Genesis had been a big success for the company, due in part to a strong US marketing campaign and the creation of everyone's favorite blue pipsqueak. These factors helped to make Sega a big deal in the gaming industry, and solidified themselves as Nintendo's main competitor in the home console scene. But those pesky cartridges, man, what is this, the Stone Ages? It's 1992, bitch, it's all about that compact disc technology. Despite existing for a full decade prior, CD-based storage mediums had only recently become popularized during the early 90s. They were much cheaper to produce and could store tons of information when compared to previous formats, which made them very appealing both in and outside of the gaming industry. While CDs wouldn't become the standard for video games for quite a few years later, game companies were already experimenting with the format in the early 90s, releasing products such as the PC Engine CD-ROM 2 add-on and Commodore CD TV multimedia system. Even Nintendo was beginning to mess around with CDs, going so far as to announce a partnership with Sony in 1990 to produce a CD-ROM based add-on for the Super Nintendo. I'm sure that partnership will work out great for them. With everyone rushing to get their optical media add-ons to market, Sega decided to follow suit, partnering with JVC to release the Sega CD on December 12, 1999 in Japan, and October 15, 1992 in North America. And... The Sega CD wasn't a death sentence for Sega, that would come 4 years later, but it definitely fell well below expectations, only managing to sell 2 million units in the US alone. At the end of the day, the Sega CD was just a little too expensive, and it barely had any major software support for people to really give a damn about it. Most of the add-ons library were just interactive movie games, which were cool at first, but quickly overstayed their welcome. All of this is to say that if Sega provided more unique first-party experiences beyond what people could already get on the Genesis, then the Sega CD probably would have done a lot better than it actually did. Though that isn't to say that Sega didn't initially try with their support of the add-on, with their killer title for the platform ultimately being... I guess Sonic was there too. While Yuji Naka and the rest of the Sega Technical Institute were hard at work on Sonic 2 in the United States, Naoto Oshima and the remaining members of Sonic Team were tasked by Sega to create a brand new Sonic game exclusively for the Sega CD. While the project initially started out as a simple enhanced port of the original Sonic the Hedgehog, the title gradually morphed into its own unique game entirely, though you can definitely still feel a lot of Sonic 1's DNA in the end product. While Sonic 2 built on the speed and level design of the original title, Oshima wanted this game to focus more on platforming and exploration, with larger levels and far more replayability. Even though Sonic CD was developed at the same time as Sonic 2 was, its development cycle went a lot smoother due to the devs not being rushed nearly as much to pump out a brand new numbered sequel. And yeah, that's basically as deep as the development for Sonic CD got. It was not nearly as hellish of an experience as Sonic 2 was, and the game ultimately released on September 23, 1993 in Japan and 2 months later in North America, and easily became the best-selling Sega CD game at 1.5 million copies sold. As mentioned previously, Sonic CD hasn't been re-released nearly as much as the other classic Sonic games. It wasn't in Sonic Jam, wasn't in Mega Collection, and certainly wasn't in Mega Collection Plus. Outside of a PC port released in 1996, the first time most Sonic fans got to experience Sonic CD was through the Sonic Gems collection, which was pretty much just created to re-release Sonic CD, since storage restraints prevented it from showing up on Mega Collection. I mean, sure, there's more than just CD and Gems collection, but the entire purpose of this collection's existence feels like it just came from some Sega executive saying to themselves, oh, we can't get CD and Mega Collection, what do we do? It's perfect. Nowadays, Sonic CD is far more accessible, either through its standalone 2011 remaster developed by Christian Whitehead, that's since been delisted, or as a part of the Sonic Origins collection. We're going to be looking at the 2011 remaster, though the version featured in Sonic Origins is largely based on this release, so you're really not missing out on much if you weren't able to purchase it before Sega delisted it. As a side note, Sega, please stop delisting your old games just to force people to buy your half-baked re-releases. Anyway, enough of the preamble, let's get into the game proper. This is Sonic CD. Once every year above a place called Never Lake, a celestial body appears in the sky known as Little Planet. I'm pretty sure the scientific term is Dwarf Planet, but whatever. Little Planet is home to the Time Stone, 7 mystical artifacts that are basically this game's Chaos Emeralds, but have the unique attribute of controlling time itself. Or, well, unique for now at least. Dr. Robotnik, ever the opportunist, chains the entirety of Little Planet to the ground and begins his conquest in pursuit of the stones. Sonic eventually gets word of Robotnik's scheme and rushes to the planet to put a stop to it. And that's about it for the plot. It's about as deep as the previous games, but it does have 2 unique distinctions that helps it stand out. For one, it features fully hand-drawn animated intro and ending cutscenes created by Studio Genio and Toei Animation. These cutscenes are so damn cool and really give Sonic CD a lot of charm, even if the quality of them did get absolutely destroyed on the Sega CD or were poorly cropped on the HD remaster. These cutscenes are gorgeously animated, full of life, and perfectly showcase what Sonic is all about. They're perfect. And the second distinction this game has is that it serves the introduction of 2 mainstay characters to the Sonic franchise, Amy Rose and Metal Sonic. Amy is a young hedgehog who came to Little Planet in the hopes of running into Sonic due to her having a massive crush on the blue blur, and that's about as much story significance she really gets here. She shows up in the second zone, gets kidnapped, and you rescue her in the penultimate zone, and those are literally her only 2 appearances before the game's ending. Not a great first impression, but it's cool to see Amy's debut in the series regardless. Metal Sonic has about as much story significance, but is way more memorable. A robotic copy of Sonic that is equal parts deadly and intimidating. Now, Sonic 2 did have Mecha Sonic, but Metal is just a complete upgrade in every regard. Metal Sonic is a great inclusion to this series, and is easily the standout of Sonic CD. I love an evil robot character, and Metal Sonic's cold dead stare in conjunction with the way his design emulates Sonic's core features in a more distorted and menacing way, makes him a standout even if his number of appearances are a little bit less than other characters in the series. So Sonic CD goes back to the first game in more ways than one. Sonic is rocking his Sonic 1 sprite, all of the previous power-ups return, Tails is nowhere to be seen, zones are back to 3x apiece, and the level design is much grander and explorative when compared to Sonic 2's more fast-paced and focused levels. As a certified not a big fan of the first Sonic game, going from Sonic 2 to CD was a bit of a step backward to be honest, but I do think that the levels in this game are generally better than the zones in Sonic 1. I mean, there's no marble zone, so it's already an improvement in that regard. I think it helps that the visuals of every level are so vibrant and unique when compared to Sonic 1's more muted color tones, though sometimes the saturation can be a bit jarring or make things a little too busy at points. To emphasize the game's intended sense of exploration, levels have a much greater focus on vertical level design when compared to the previous games. But why have such an emphasis on exploration at all? Well, it's all because of the main mechanic Sonic CD introduces that makes or breaks the entire experience: time travel. In each level, there are several signposts labeled with past or future. Passing by one of these signposts and maintaining speed for a short period of time will allow you to teleport to the past or future versions of each zone. This is an insanely cool concept. Sonic CD only has 7 zones compared to the 11 zones of Sonic 2, but with the inclusion of past and future variants, there are over 60 unique levels to play through, which is crazy. Here's how it falls apart. In the past version of each level lies a robot transporter that you need to seek out and destroy in order to prevent Robotnik's bad future and ultimately get the game's good ending. You have to do this for every level in the game. Not only is this incredibly tedious, but it also makes the game heavily lopsided because you basically have zero reason to ever travel to the future, unless you just really want to see how Robotnik fucks everything up. On top of the bad feature, each zone also has a good feature variant, which you have even less of a reason to go to, outside of gaining a sense of accomplishment of seeing the good future you helped to create. This is so disappointing because I think the time travel concept is so cool, but you have zero incentive to ever go to the future versions of these levels. But you see, the past versions of zones being the only ones that matter would be one thing, but it's the actual method of time traveling that just destroys any enjoyment I have for this mechanic. Having to maintain speed just to time travel is so needlessly frustrating due to how asinine the game's level design and collision detection is. If you drop your speed for a millisecond, your ass is not time traveling, and dropping your speed is incredibly easy to do given how enemies and springs constantly pop up out of nowhere, or how the game will just randomly cut your speed anyway because you looked at it funny. There is the occasional dedicated spot where you can safely build speed, but 90% of the time you'll just have to hope and pray you don't bump into anything, or else you'll have to scour these massive levels for a new signpost because they're all one use only. It's so weird too because Sonic has this new move called the Super Peel Out on top of the Spin Dash, and I'm assuming it was created to help with making time traveling easier, but A, the Super Peel Out doesn't kill enemies and leaves you vulnerable whenever you use it, and B, the Spin Dash is not the Sonic 2 Spin Dash, so it's relatively underwhelming to use in general. Though future re-releases do give you the option to use the more traditional Spin Dash, which I do appreciate. If Sonic CD's levels weren't so massive and all over the place and signposts weren't one-time use, I would find the time travel mechanic a lot more enjoyable. But as it stands, I just find it incredibly tedious and underwhelming. Now, thankfully there is another method of unlocking the good ending in case you're also not crazy about time traveling constantly. Just like collecting the Chaos Emeralds in Sonic 1, if you grab 50 rings and jump into the massive ring at the end of any act, then you're automatically taken to this game's special stages to try and earn the time stones. Grabbing all the time stones also automatically unlocks a good future for whatever zone you're in, so it's a pretty good alternative method for unlocking the good ending overall. I've been extremely critical of the special stages in the previous games, but I honestly kind of dig these. Your controls are stiff as all hell, but I think the 2D emulating 3D aesthetic works way better in this game than it did in Sonic 2, and I don't find these special stages nearly as punching as the half pipe either. Though I'm sure if I was playing the original version of CD and not the remaster, I would probably be singing a different tune. Your objective in these special stages is to simply destroy all of the UFOs in the allotted time, and I think their simplicity benefits them overall. Since this game is heavily based around Sonic 1 though, that means there's no Super Sonic, so going for the good ending is really just for bragging rights at the end of the day. So yeah, I'm not going for the good ending. Shocker. Look, if I wasn't going to go through the process of unlocking Super Sonic just because I didn't want to deal with the special stages in Sonic 2, then I'm certainly not going to go through the process of time traveling all willy-nilly just to watch a cutscene you can easily look up on YouTube. I'm not that torn up about it though. If anything, I like the bad ending more because I get to watch Sonic kill Robotnik with a rock in that one. I've already mentioned how this game's design kind of frustrates me, but let's go a little bit deeper and talk about what I think about each individual zone from the game. Palm Tree Panic is another Green Hill type stage, so there's not really much to talk about beyond this neat little half pipe section. Collision Chaos is next, and it kind of takes all of the worst aspects of Spring Yard and Casino Night Zone and creates a level that isn't nearly as fun as either of those two. Also, I hope you like alliteration because every level in this game has it. Tidal Tempest is just Labyrinth Zone again, but not nearly as frustrating. It's also where I noticed that the drowning jingle isn't in this game for some reason. That's like one of the most iconic aspects of the series at this point, but it's just not here. It's really odd. Quartz Quadrant, I barely remember anything about this one, other than the boss fight where you're just running on a treadmill until Robotnik's platform wears out. Robotnik's really slacking on the boss fights in general this time around. All of them are painfully easy to beat, outside of the pinball boss fight, which is just more annoying than hard. Come to think of it, I didn't find the game's difficulty to be all that challenging in general. Sure, the level design is annoying, but I wasn't starving for lives and rings nearly as much as when I first played Sonic 1 and 2. Anyway, onto Wacky Workbench. Hey, that was my nickname in college. This level is a pain in the ass to navigate thanks to all the bounce pads at the bottom of the level and electrical grids everywhere. I didn't like this one. Thankfully the game ends pretty strong at least with a 2-hit combo of Stardust Speedway and Metallic Madness. I'm going to start with Metallic Madness first because while it is a pretty tough final zone, I'd still much rather play it any day of the week over Metropolis, Wing Fortress, or even Scrap Brain Zone. That's not to say that it doesn't still have its annoying bits, but all in all, I thought it was way better designed than the final levels of the previous games. Man, it feels weird actually complimenting a final Sonic level for once, but here we are. Stardust Speedway is easily the game's most iconic level, due in part to the boss fight against Metal Sonic and the incredible music that plays here. I guess this is as good of a time as any to gush about the soundtrack because oh man is it incredible. The game's soundtrack was composed by Naofumi Hataya and Masafumi Ogata, and you can tell that they went all out here. Being able to work with CD level quality allowed the composers to go absolutely ham, producing a soundtrack that's upbeat, funky, and experimental all at the same time. It's also the first Sonic game to feature vocals, which are very prominent in the game's intro theme, You Can Do Anything, and as part of various other tracks throughout the game. Now, a lot of the flowers I've given to Sonic CD's OST is specifically directed towards the Japanese soundtrack, because for some reason when Sega of America was bringing the game stateside, they thought it needed a completely new OST composed by Spencer Nilsson and David Young. And while the Japanese soundtrack is leagues and bounds better than the American one, there are still a handful of good tracks here, with Palm Tree Panic, Tidal Tempest, Metallic Madness, and of course Sonic Boom being some of my personal favorites. Weirdly enough, the US soundtrack still keeps the original themes for the past versions of every stage, so filthy Americans like myself were able to get a bit of a sampling of the game's original OST. Gotta say though, there is absolutely no reason Robotnik's boss theme should be as dread-inducing as it is, considering how much of a pushover he is in this game. Overall though, the US soundtrack is just a little too generic for my taste personally, even if it does still have some merits. The Japanese soundtrack though, all bangers from start to finish. Even the level clear jingle is great. So that's Sonic CD. It's fine, I guess. I'm gonna be honest, this one really didn't do it for me, which is a huge shame because I can see the ambition the dev team had for it. But overall, the time travel mechanic feels half-baked, the game's level design is all over the place, unmemorable, or just flat out derivative of Sonic 1's levels. And as a whole, I just think it's a big step down when compared to Sonic 2. There were several points throughout the game where I had to ask myself where the hell I was going, and after beating the final boss, I was just left with a feeling of, that's it? At the very least, I do think it's a bit better than Sonic 1 if not for the soundtrack alone. But the problem is that even if you were to play this like an average Genesis Sonic game, i.e. not going for the robot generators and just holding right 90% of the time, it's still only like an hour-long game, with many levels being a little over 30 seconds long. At the end of the day, while Sonic CD might be the most replayable classic Sonic game so far, I also found it one of the most unfulfilling. It's not a bad game, but I do think you'd be better off playing Sonic 2. Well, at least there's some extras to mess around with. There's no multiplayer, but the 2011 remaster does have a score attack mode where you can see how fast you can beat the game's main levels and special stages. One of the rewards for getting it fast enough time is getting to watch the intro and ending cutscenes whenever you want. You know, in case you needed another reason to not go for all the robot generators or time stones. You can also mess around with the sound test mode to find some secret images like this one where Sonic is a DJ, or this creepy ass ship that definitely made a 10-year-old piss themselves at some point. There's also this little Easter egg where if you leave Sonic idle on a stage for 3 minutes, he'll jump off the level and give you an instant game over. Whoa, that's really cool, I should try that.